The cabin went silent the moment his hand touched the armrest of seat 2A. A man in a plain hoodie, worn sneakers. Nothing about him looked like first class. But when the flight attendant leaned in and said, "Sir, that seat isn't for people like you," the entire plane froze. Laughter followed, tickets were torn, and even the captain joined in, certain they were humiliating a man who didn't belong. What no one on that flight realized, what had every phone recording, every heart racing, was that the passenger they were trying to erase carried a truth so powerful it would flip the cabin upside down and end careers before the plane even left the ground. The words slice through the cabin sharper than the chime of the seatbelt sign. Every passenger in first class goes still, their attention caught not by turbulence, but by the tone cold, clipped, and meant to humiliate. At the center of it all stands Fiona Blake, a flight attendant in her late 30s, blonde hair pinned into a bun so precise it looks carved in place. Her uniform iron sharp enough to cut. Her voice carries down the aisle with practice projection. But this isn't customer service sits accusation. The man she addresses doesn't answer. Avery Cole, mid-40s, skin dark as polished oak, stands at seat 2, one of the most coveted window spots in first class. His hand rests lightly on the leather armrest, fingers still, posture steady. He wears a plain navy hoodie, jeans that have seen better days, and sneakers whose soles show the long miles they've carried him. No watch gleams on his wrist, no briefcase at his side. To Fiona, he looks more like a man heading home from a night shift than someone boarding first class. But Avery doesn't move, doesn't explain, doesn't shrink. That silence unnerves the nearby passengers more than if he had shouted. A businessman in a charcoal suit tugs at his tie, trying not to look. A young woman, too, rows back, angles her phone ever so slightly, pretending to scroll, but watching closely. The couple standing in the aisle beside Avery Preston and Sloane Whitaker, draped in designer brands, diamonds flashing under cabin lights, exchange a smirk. To them, this is entertainment before takeoff. Fiona folds her arms, her lips tightening. This cabin is reserved for premium guests, she continues, her voice a performance pitched for an audience. Economy is that way. She gestures to the back of the plane with a manicured finger, the smile on her face brittle as glass. Avery lowers himself into the seat without a word. The leather sighs under his weight. He sits with the patience of stone, unmoving, unbothered, or at least appearing so. His calm is almost confrontational. The air thickens. Trent Wallace, the purser, steps forward. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with hair slicked back like he's preparing for a corporate photo. His smirk arrives before his words. "Sir, unless you can prove otherwise, you'll need to move." First class isn't charity. Gasps ripple through the rows. The remark lands like a slap. Preston chuckles under his breath, leaning against his polished suitcase as if waiting for the show to end. Sloane whispers something to him, lips curved in satisfaction. Still, Avery sits. His right hand rests loosely on his lap, thumb pressing against the crease of a folded boarding pass. The paper is slightly bent from being handled, edges softened, ink still bold. He doesn't raise it. He doesn't wave it. He just lets it sit there, silent proof of what should already be his. But Fiona isn't interested in quiet proof. Her eyes narrow. She leans down and, without permission, snatches the pass from his lap. Her nails flash red against the white paper as she lifts it to eye level like a detective inspecting counterfeit bills. The cabin leans with her. Next crane, eyes widen, breaths pause. It feels like a courtroom now, and the jury is made of strangers in leather seats. This, Fiona's voice sharpens, slicing the silence. This isn't real. Not in a million years. Trent chuckles audibly, his amusement thick enough to coat the air. "Nice try," he says loudly enough for row 3 to hear. Print shops must be running specials on fake tickets these days. A low ripple of laughter spreads from the Whitakers. Preston whispers, "Unbelievable. He really thought he could sit here." Fiona doesn't give Avery the chance to respond. With one swift, brutal motion, she tears the boarding pass clean down the middle. The rip echoes faintly, cruelly, louder than the steady hum of the engines. Then she tears again, reducing it to scraps, until the paper that represented his dignity falls into confetti. The sound draws a gasp from a woman across the aisle. Someone mutters, "That looked real to me." Another passenger adjusts their phone, screen reflecting cabin lights as they record silently, unwilling to intervene but unable to look away. The shredded pieces drift on Avery's lap like snow. He doesn't brush them off. He doesn't argue. He leans back against the headrest, steady, jaw set, gaze locked on Fiona's face. That calmness unsettles her more than any confrontation could. She flicks the scraps in Trent's waiting hand. He shoves them into his pocket with a laugh. "Trash," Fiona declares, brushing her palms together as though ridding herself of filth. "Sir, you've embarrassed yourself enough," Trent adds with a smirk. "Gather your things. Economy's waiting." The Whitakers smile wider, Sloane easing into the seat beside Avery as if she's earned it, her silk scarf brushing against his arm. Preston positions his suitcase in the overhead bin above, his expression smug. Avery sits, unmoving, his shoulders relaxed, his breathing slow. He doesn't look at them, doesn't challenge them. His thumb taps once against the armrest, a sound so soft it could be mistaken for the rhythm of the air system. One tap. Silence. Fiona leans closer, her perfume sharp, suffocating. "You can't sit here. You never could," she hisses, her smile curling. The words hang in the air, heavy as lead. Around them, passengers stare openly now, some with disgust, some with discomfort, most with unease. The businessman in row 3 tilts his head, his eyes narrowing as if debating whether to say something. But he doesn't. None of them do. The aisle feels tighter, the cabin colder. Avery remains seated, silent, unmoved. His quiet presence grows louder than any protest, unsettling in its steadiness. Fiona straightens, irritation flashing across her face. She turns toward Trent, her voice sharper now. "Security will handle this." Trent nods, crossing his arms, standing like a guard posted at Avery's shoulder. His smirk returns, practiced and smug. From the rear of the cabin, a passenger's voice dares to cut through. "Why'd you tear his ticket?" Fiona ignores it, her chin lifted high, eyes locked on Avery, waiting for him to break. He doesn't. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He only stares ahead, his thumb brushing once more against the armrest. The silence spreads like a storm cloud, pressing against every row, suffocating in its weight. Passengers shift, whisper, glance at each other, and yet no one knows what to do. And still, Avery sits, unbroken, unmoved, waiting. The air in the cabin feels different now, thicker, as if the oxygen itself has turned heavy, pressing down on every passenger who witnessed what just happened. The shredded ticket pieces, hidden away in Trent's pocket, feel like stolen proof. Avery sits silent in 2A, steady as stone, while Fiona hovers like a warden waiting for a prisoner to bend. But silence doesn't bend. It spreads. Passengers whisper across the aisle. A woman in row 3 shakes her head slightly, lips pressed thin. A teenager 2 rows back, pulls his hood tighter, and whispers, "This isn't right," only to be hushed by his friend, afraid of being noticed. The unease grows, yet no one steps forward. Not yet. Trent clears his throat, puffing his chest as though he's about to issue a proclamation. He unlocks the crew tablet strapped to his hip, its screen glowing in the dimmed cabin. "Let's settle this," he says, voice carrying like a referee. He types quickly, searching the passenger manifest. Then he tilts the device just enough for Fiona to see, his lips curling. "Nothing," he declares. "No Avery Cole on this list. Not in first class." Gasps ripple through the nearby rows. To the untrained eye, the empty line on the tablet looks conclusive, like a final verdict. Passengers lean in as though the glow of the screen holds truth itself. Fiona smiles, triumphant. There it is. He doesn't exist here. Avery doesn't flinch. His eyes remain steady, focused not on the screen, but on Trent's thumb hovering suspiciously near the edit icon, lingering too long, covering just enough of the details. In the row behind, Jasmine Brooks leans toward her husband Oliver. Did you see how fast he scrolled? She whispers. Too fast. Oliver adjusts his glasses, nodding. He had snapped a quick photo earlier, capturing Avery holding a ticket. The angle isn't perfect, but the details are there. Proof. Fiona notices Jasmine watching and tilts her chin arrogantly. Ma'am, for your own comfort, please remain uninvolved. Her words are polite, but the glare in her eyes is a warning. The uneasy energy swells. Then the cockpit door opens with a metallic click. Captain Richard Hargreaves emerges, his presence filling the aisle like a gavel striking wood. Tall, gray streaking his temples. Posture rigid from years of command, he's a man used to being obeyed without question. What's the problem here? His voice is low, gruff, not rushed. A tone that signals he expects answers, not excuses. Fiona doesn't hesitate. Captain, he's attempting to occupy first class without a proper ticket. We've asked him repeatedly to move. He refuses. He's disrupting the boarding process. Trent holds up the tablet like evidence in court. Nothing on the manifest. No record. The passengers murmur again, some shaking their heads, others whispering louder now. But they tore it, someone hisses. I saw them tear it. The truth is floating in the air, but not yet solid enough to land. Hargreaves narrows his eyes at Avery. Sir, stand up now. If you belong here, show proof. If not, we'll resolve this quickly. First class isn't for everyone. The line lands heavy. Not just an order, but a dismissal. To half the cabin, it sounds like protocol. To the other half, it sounds like prejudice sharpened into policy. Avery's gaze lifts slowly, meeting the captain's eyes. His face is calm, unreadable. He doesn't argue. He doesn't plead. He simply breathes, his shoulders loose, his hands resting on the armrests, as though rooted to the leather itself. Sir, this isn't optional, Hargreaves says firmly, his voice clipped. You have two choices. Move, or security removes you. The cabin tightens, hearts pounding louder than the engines spooling outside. The Whitakers exchange smug glances, Sloane curling into her seat beside Avery, as though she's already won. Preston adjusts his cufflinks, smirking like a man who thinks the world is in its right order again. But the world isn't in order. It's waiting. From the rear, the sound of firm footsteps rises measured, deliberate. Sergeant Taryn Wynn of the airport police steps into the aisle. Her uniform is sharp navy, utility belt heavy at her hips, radio crackling faintly. She moves with the weight of authority, eyes sharp, no wasted motion. Captain, she says briskly, you requested assistance? Hargreaves nods, pointing toward Avery. Yes. Passenger refuses to move. Claims a seat without proof. Tara studies Avery in silence, scanning him the way a guard surveys a block evaluating posture, eyes, hands. She steps closer, her tone flat, stripped of warmth. Sir, I'll need you to comply. Either you walk back on your own, or I'll make the call to have you removed. The passengers inhale sharply, the air charged with tension. Phones tilt higher. Whispers turn into murmurs. Removed, someone mutters. Another voice hisses back. But he hasn't even done anything. Through it all, Avery remains seated, calm as stone. His thumb taps the armrest once. A rhythm, a heartbeat in the silence. Fiona folds her arms, satisfaction dripping from her tone. Finally, maybe now he'll get the message. Trent grins, leaning toward Avery with a mocking lilt. Hear that? One more second and you're gone. Maybe next time you'll know your place. The cruelty in his words stings the air. A teenager in the back gasps softly, covering her mouth. In row 6, Jasmine clutches Oliver's arm, her jaw tight. This isn't right, she whispers fiercely. And then a small shift in the crowd. Lena Ortiz, the trainee flight attendant standing near the galley, fidgets with the small microphone clipped to her uniform. She has been quiet all flight, her eyes wide, her shoulders tight. But when Fiona shredded the ticket, Lena pressed record. The device has been capturing every word since. She knows what she has is dangerous, but also necessary. She takes a half step forward, her lips pressed together, her fingers trembling as they hover near the recorder. She glances at Avery, then at Tara, then back again. Her silence is filled with fear, but also something stronger, conscience. Avery doesn't notice her. He doesn't move. His silence remains unbroken, his presence unflinching. The storm is swelling, but he is still its center. Hargreaves stiffens, his voice iron. "Officer, remove him." Tara's hand hovers near her radio. "Last chance, sir. Cooperate, or I'll make the call." The cabin holds its breath. Dozens of strangers wait, suspended between injustice and eruption. Preston leans closer to Sloane, whispering smugly. "See? Problem solved." Fiona smirks. Trent presses harder, fingers gripping Avery's shoulder, testing for resistance. Still, Avery doesn't move. His eyes remain steady, his jawline set, his breathing slow. And then, for the first time since the start of this ordeal, he speaks. His voice is low, calm, almost a whisper, but heavy enough that those closest lean forward to hear. "Please," he says softly, "check with ownership." The words hang in the air, strange, cryptic. Not a plea, not a protest, just a statement, steady as stone. The cabin ripples with confusion. Fiona frowns. Trent blinks. Tara hesitates, her radio hovering inches from her lips. Even Hargreaves falters for a second, the certainty in his stance cracking ever so slightly. Ownership. The word lingers like smoke, curling into every corner of the cabin. No one knows exactly what it means yet, but the way Avery says it with calm certainty, not desperation, plants doubt in the minds of those who had already judged him. Jasmine whispers to Oliver, "What does he mean?" Oliver shakes his head, eyes fixed on Avery. "I don't know," he replies. "But look at him. He knows something they don't." And in that suspended silence, in the hush before the storm breaks, the passengers feel it. The balance has shifted. The man in the navy hoodie is no longer just a passenger refusing to move. He has become a mystery, a question, a presence too steady to dismiss. Fiona tries to recover, her voice sharp. "Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. He doesn't belong here. He never did." But the conviction in her tone no longer feels absolute. And Avery? He simply sits, silent, waiting. His thumb taps the armrest once more. The sound is faint, but to those who notice, it feels like a drumbeat calling something inevitable. The word ownership hangs in the cabin like a lone note that won't fade. It slips under the engine hum, threads through the clipped breaths, and lands where it matters most, behind the eyes of the people who still haven't decided what they believe. Hargreaves stands square in the aisle, jaw set, but something in his posture shifts, a small recalibration that only the attentive catch. Tara Nguyen doesn't lower her radio, but she doesn't raise it either. Fiona's smile, practiced into perfection, loses a shade of its shine. Trent presses the crew tablet to his chest, as if covering it could make the question disappear. Avery doesn't add a word. He doesn't need to. He lets the single line work, patient as tied on stone. A quiet murmur starts 3 rows back and moves forward like a breeze. Jasmine Brooks turns the earlier photo on her phone. Pinching in on the image, she caught a frame of Avery with the boarding pass still intact, the seat number visible if you know where to look. Oliver leans toward it, thumb framing the corner. Not perfect, but enough to pull doubt through the seams. He inhales softly, not the sound of certainty, but of someone finding a handle where there was only a wall. Fiona notices the lean in their seats and steps closer, chin lifted. "Ma'am, sir, you're interfering with an operational matter. Please keep your devices to yourselves." The words land with the authority of a posted sign, but the ground under them feels less solid than it did 5 minutes ago. The teenager in row 6, eyes wide, whispers. He said ownership, and though her friend hushes her again, the whisper doesn't die. It multiplies, crossing aisles, bouncing off headrests, turning into a question that doesn't care who tries to block it. Ownership of what? Ownership of whom? Trent exhales loudly, a theatrical sigh. "Enough," he says, unlocking the tablet. The screen throws a pale light across his face. He scrolls with force, tapping and swiping so quickly the list blurs. No colon first. No colon business. No colon economy. C. He angles the tablet toward Fiona and not toward the aisle. His thumb slides across the bezel and lingers at the corner where an edit icon lives. It's a small thing. It's also not small at all. Hargreaves narrows his eyes. Hold it steady, he says, the way a man insists on control when control feels slippery. Trent obeys, but the angle barely widens. Avery's eyes drop to the tablet without moving his head. He watches the cadence of Trent's swipes, the way the manifest loads, refreshes, and stalls. He notes the flicker in a field he's seen before, the kind that appears when a system pings a different database for permissions it doesn't usually have to check. He doesn't explain that to anyone. He won't. He just breathes, slow and measured, and rests back into the leather that was always his. Tara tilts her radio toward her shoulder and lowers her voice. Ops, this is Nguyen at Gate 12, Aircraft Bravo 9er. Requesting guidance. Passenger dispute regarding seating. Allegation of torn documentation and a claim of corporate ownership relevance. Stand by for details. Static answers first, then a calm voice that doesn't perform for an audience. Copy, Sergeant. Confirm involved crew names and status of original document. Tara's gaze cuts to Fiona. Original boarding pass. Fiona's jaw flicks. Confiscated. Counterfeit. The single word lands hard, too sure for the evidence that exists. Where is it now? Tara asks. Fiona gestures lightly toward Trent, as if tossing an apron at the end of shift. Trent pats his pocket, then freezes for the briefest heartbeat. He doesn't want to fish out what he shredded. He doesn't want to put the proof back in the light. He forces his mouth into a smile that reads as calm to those who want it to. Disposed, he says. Counterfeit items are not retained. Hargreaves blinks once, and if anyone is keeping score, it's the first visible crack in his veneer. Disposed where? Galley bin, Trent replies. He doesn't look toward it. Tara follows the gaze he refuses to take. I'll need that bin brought forward. Fiona's tone tilts. Sergeant, we can't sift refuse in front of premium passengers. We can if it secures evidence, Tara says, the calm, kind of unmovable. And we will. She keys the radio again. Ops, confirming. Crew disposed of seized document prior to security review. The answer comes crisp. Copy. Secure any available physical remnants. Confirm if electronic PNR record shows manual edits within the last 10 minutes. Trent shifts his weight. He knows the system logs everything. He knows whose badge touched what field. He also knows the passengers don't need to know any of that to feel which way this is turning. The galley curtain stirs. A junior attendant brings the small refuse sack with both hands, knuckles pale, as if handling a live wire. The smell of brewed coffee ghosts out as Tara pulls on nitrile gloves she retrieved from a pouch at her belt. She doesn't perform the search. She just does it methodical, quick, unbothered by optics. The bag rustles, paper whispers. A thin white scrap surfaces with a clean diagonal edge, the kind a printer makes, not a counterfeit shop. Another scrap bears the faint print of a seat number. 2A. Tara places each piece on a service tray, flat, careful. She doesn't reconstruct a whole boarding pass. She doesn't need to. She only needs to prove that there was something to destroy. Fiona steps back half a pace. Her smile, when it returns, is thinner. Counterfeiters can put numbers anywhere, she says softly. It's not for Tara. It's for the rows listening. It sounds reasonable. That's the trouble with it. Reasonable words can be used for anything, including contempt. Lena Ortiz watches from the galley threshold, hands pressed together so tightly her knuckles show. The small crew iPhone tucked against her palm hums with silent proof, the rip, the lines, the laugh that followed. She looks to Tara and takes the step that changes where she stands in the world. Sergeant, she says, voice careful, respectful. I recorded from the moment Ms. Blake took the document. Audio only. Tara doesn't hesitate. Thank you. Please preserve an airdrop to this device with your badge number noted. She raises her duty phone, a simple rectangle with a case that proves it's been dropped more than once. Lena sends it in 3 quick taps. The chime is quiet as snowfall. Tara plays the memo low, speaker close to her ear. Fiona's voice fills the tiny space around Tara's head, confident and cutting. "We're not doing this today." The clean rip. Trent's words, almost a grin you can hear. No proof, no name, no seat. The silence afterward is louder than voices. Tara pauses the clip and lifts her eyes. She says nothing for a moment, then keys her radio. "Ops, I have audio establishing the sequence of seizure and destruction. Requesting manifest audit for manual alterations within a 5-minute window." "Audit in progress," comes the reply. "Stand by." Hargreaves' gaze searches Tara's face the way a captain reads weather beyond the windshield. He isn't an unfeeling man. He is a man who has lived inside a hierarchy so long that the walls feel structural, not optional. For the first time, he looks at Avery as more than a disruption. "Sir," he says, and the word lands without the edge it carried before. "Do you assert that your seating is tied to a corporate ownership arrangement?" Avery considers the captain's face, not the uniform, not the bars, then answers without heat. "I assert only that the record reflects more than a seat assignment." He doesn't push. He doesn't preen. He lets the captain fill the blank with whatever his conscience can stand. Trent's smile strains. He lifts the tablet again and pretends not to hear the talk of an audit. "Manifest governs the cabin," he recites. He has said this line 100 times. It worked every time until now. Jasmine finds Oliver's hand, squeezes it once. Her voice is barely above a breath. "You don't tear something you're sure is fake," she says. "You bag it." Oliver nods. "Chain of custody," he answers, like a student repeating a lesson. "And you don't hide a screen if it's clean." Fiona hears them. "You would have to be made of stone not to." She turns slightly, angling her shoulder, a small attempt to block the line of sight that doesn't change the view as much as she wants. Sloane Whitaker, finally uncomfortable, slips her scarf from her neck, as if the fabric is suddenly too tight. Preston checks his watch, not for the time, but for the reassurance that it's still there, a tiny certificate of worth he can touch when a room won't obey him. Tara's radio crackles. "Ops Tingwin. Audit shows a manual suppression of a PNR field tied to seat 2A within the last 4 minutes from device ID ending -7W. Badge authentication pending. Recommend passenger remain seated while we complete chain review. Captain to remove involved staff from passenger-facing duty at gate pending investigation." The sound leaves no place to stand that isn't exactly where you are. Hargreaves inhales slowly. He looks at Fiona, then at Trent, then at the tablet that was supposed to settle everything and has settled nothing at all. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't scold his crew in front of strangers. He only says, "Understood," into the air, and everyone who has worked under command knows what that word means when spoken like that. Fiona's throat works. "Captain, with respect, we dash at gate." He answers, not unkind, not soft either. "You'll speak at gate." Trent drops his eyes to the tablet, as if the glow there could lampshade his face. The light does not obey him. It shows him to anyone who wants to look. Tara turns to Avery. "Sir, for the record, do you have any secondary form of travel documentation?" It isn't a challenge. It's a procedure offered like a bridge. Avery nods once and opens a plain leather wallet. There is no flourish, no flash of metal for theater. He removes a compact, ID laminated, professional, worn at the corners. It bears his photograph and the restrained plainness of corporate design. Horizon Group, Executive Director, Access, Operations Fleet Compliance. He does not hand it to Fiona. He presents it to Tara as a person presents evidence to the person who asked for it. Tara reads carefully. She doesn't pretend to have authority. She doesn't. "Ops," she says into the radio. "I've been shown a Horizon Group executive credential. Name matches passenger. Copy." The voice from the other end remains steady. "Copy, Sergeant. That credential aligns with our parent ownership registry. Passenger remains in assigned seat. Initiate standard relief of involved crew at gate. Duty manager will meet aircraft. Begin witness statements with trainee in rows 1 through 4. The cabin does not explode with noise. It exhales. Some people drop their shoulders a fraction. Some people close their eyes like they've been holding a glass of water, steady, for too long. Jasmine lets out a breath she didn't know she was keeping. Oliver sets his phone in his lap screen down, not because he no longer needs it, but because the story no longer rests only on him to keep. Fiona doesn't speak. Trent doesn't either. Sloane slides a half-inch away from 2B's armrest, as if the leather itself just told her it has a memory. Preston's smile goes out like a match in wind. Hargreaves straightens the line of his jacket. "Sergeant, please proceed with statements," he says. Then to Avery, with a steadiness that acknowledges what happened without confessing every piece of it. "You'll remain undisturbed for the duration." Avery inclines his head once. "Thank you." It isn't triumph. It isn't even relief. It is a man accepting the baseline that should never have been argued. Tara nods to Lena. "Ms. Ortiz with me." Lena swallows, eyes glossy, but her voice holds. "Yes, Sergeant." She steps into the aisle, not hiding the tremor in her hands, not hiding the righteousness either. Avery watches her pass with something like gratitude under the surface of his stillness. He turns his head a degree and meets Jasmine's eyes across the aisle. No smile, just recognition. People held the line when it mattered. The captain returns to the cockpit. The curtain breathes closed behind him. The cabin settles a notch, not into comfort yet, but into the knowledge that the arc is bending somewhere other than down. Avery rests his hand on the armrest and taps once. The sound is small, but to the few who have learned to listen, it's a bell. Out near the wing, the light shifts. It catches the curve of metal and returns to the window in a bright, transient band here, then gone like the shape of a moment you can only see when you stop trying to. Fiona looks at Trent and finds no script waiting in his eyes. Whatever happens at the gate will not be managed with a smile. Whatever she tells herself in the mirror after this will not scrub easily. She glances at Lena's retreating back and understands. Too late. That rank and courage are not the same word. The interphone chirps softly. A ground manager confirms they'll board a duty supervisor on arrival. The announcement isn't for passengers. It's for process. The machine of accountability, slow to start, is awake now. Avery closes his wallet and places it carefully back into his hoodie pocket. He does not clutch it. He doesn't need to. He looks forward past the narrow aisle, past the curtain, to the quiet space that exists when a person knows the next part of the story will not require them to raise their voice to be heard. The cabin still listens with him. The worst part of the storm has not ended, but it has decided where it will pass. And for the first time since the ripping of paper, the aircraft feels a fraction lighter, as if it, too, has just remembered that proof, when it is patient and plain, changes the air. The cabin doesn't return to normal after Tara's words. It can't. Too much has been said, too much torn and scattered in front of everyone. Relief is there, yes, a subtle easing in shoulders, a faint exhale that ripples through row after row, but it's fragile. It clings to the edges of doubt, because nobody knows yet how this flight will land. Not in the literal sense, but in the way people will remember it. Fiona and Trent retreat a few steps, their polished uniforms suddenly less like authority and more like costumes slipping out of fit. They don't speak, which says more than words ever could. Silence from them now feels like surrender, or perhaps calculation. The kind of pause people take when trying to decide if they'll deny, apologize, or deflect when the door opens at the gate. Avery doesn't look at them. He has never looked at them longer than necessary. His gaze stays ahead, fixed on nothing and yet on everything, the picture of calm that rattles those who try to humiliate him. His hand rests again on the armrest, thumb poised, then pressing once in that quiet rhythm. To the passengers who've noticed, it has become more than a habit. It's a signal steady, deliberate grounding. The Brooks couple lean closer to each other. Jasmine whispers, he knew all along. That's why he didn't react. He knew what he had. Oliver nods, still shaken by the way Fiona ripped the boarding pass without hesitation. He mutters back, and they knew what they were doing. You don't shred something unless you're scared of what it proves. The conversation isn't private. Not really. People nearby catch fragments, and soon the thought is circulating, turning into a truth that gains power the more it's repeated. The truth that what happened here wasn't a misunderstanding, but a choice. Captain Hargreaves sits back in the cockpit now, curtain drawn, but But even with the barrier, his authority isn't what it was minutes ago. The passengers have seen the crack, and once a crack is there, the shape of command never looks the same. Tara stands near the galley, speaking in low tones into her radio, confirming witness collection will begin after landing. Her voice is all professionalism, stripped of bias, but her eyes glance to Avery more than once, not with suspicion, but with the cautious respect one offers someone who has endured without breaking. The Whitakers, once so smug, sit stiff in their seats. Preston doesn't meet anyone's eyes. Sloane fiddles endlessly with her scarf, wrapping and unwrapping it like a shield. Their laughter from earlier feels grotesque now, remembered by everyone who heard it. They sense it too, the weight of eyes judging them in silence. When the engines shift, signaling pushback is near, a hush sweeps the cabin. It isn't the usual pre-flight calm, but something heavier. Each person is replaying the last half hour in their heads, deciding what it means, deciding if they'll tell someone about it when they land. And in that silence, Avery finally speaks again. His voice is low, carrying no anger, no gloating, but firm enough that even those in row 7 hear it clearly. Respect shouldn't depend on a badge. The words land like a stone dropped into still water. No flourish, no speech, just truth stated as plainly as breathing. Fiona flinches visibly, though she tries to disguise it by turning to adjust the service card. Trent stares at the floor. The Whitakers look away. The rest of the cabin absorbs it, some nodding slightly, some whispering to themselves. Jasmine whispers to Oliver, "He's right. That's why it hurts so much." Because it's true. Oliver only squeezes her hand. The flight continues into its motions, doors closed, engines spooling, the slow crawl to the runway, but the air never regains the easy small talk of a normal departure. Instead, it holds something taut and electric, like everyone is waiting for a second shoe to drop. It drops when Ops calls back. Tara raises her radio, listening carefully before repeating for the record. Audit complete. Crew tablet accessed reservation system with suppression override. Badge authentication confirms user Wallace. Passengers' original assignment to seat 2A reinstated in system. Instruction: passenger remains seated. Involve crew relieved of service duties upon arrival. Further investigation to follow. The words hang heavy. Trent's face drains of color, his jaw tight. Fiona's hands twist behind her back, the practiced poise cracking. The confirmation isn't just about Avery, it's about them, about the lies exposed in black and white. The passengers don't cheer. They don't need to. Their silence is worse for the guilty. It's the kind of silence that follows revelation, when there's nothing left to deny. Tara acknowledges the order, then lowers her radio. Her eyes flick to Avery, a small nod passing between them. Nothing exaggerated, just acknowledgement. He returns it, barely moving his chin, but the connection is their mutual recognition that what was hidden is now documented. The engines roar, and the aircraft turns onto the runway. As the thrust builds, people grip armrests, but not just from the physical push of acceleration. It feels symbolic too, as though everyone is bracing for what's to come when the wheels leave the ground and when they touch back down again. The plane lifts, climbs through the heavy clouds, and levels at cruising altitude. Cabin lights dim. Fiona and Trent remain in the galley, hands idle, postures rigid. They've been removed from service quietly, as Ops instructed. Another attendant takes their place, performing drink service with careful professionalism, aware that every move is now under sharper scrutiny than usual. Lena Ortiz hovers near the service area, uncertain whether to stand with her colleagues or with her conscience. Her recorder is still tucked in her pocket, but she knows the words on it have already shifted the course of the night. She glances at Avery, catches his eye for a second. His expression is unreadable, but there's something in the faint nod he gives her approval, perhaps gratitude. Her chest loosens with a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Hours stretch long in the dim cabin. Passengers settle into uneasy rest, but the story lingers in the recycled air, refusing to dissolve. Some close their eyes but can't sleep, still replaying the rip of paper, the cruel lines spoken with too much relish. Avery sits still not reading, not sleeping, simply present. Every so often his thumb taps the armrest, steady as a clock, reminding those nearby that patience can be more powerful than any outburst. The descent begins, the city lights spreading like constellations beneath the wings. The captain's voice announces arrival procedures, but the authority that once rang unchallenged now carries a subtle tremor, heard only by those listening for it. The landing is smooth, tires kissing the runway with barely a jolt. But the moment the plane slows, tension rises again. Everyone knows what waits at the gate. Supervisors, statements, accountability. Fiona and Trent know it too. Their faces are pale, their voices absent. Sloane Whitaker finally speaks, whispering to her husband, "We shouldn't have laughed." Preston's reply is terse, defensive. "No one will remember us." But he doesn't sound convinced. The aircraft taxis, slows, and finally stops. The seatbelt sign dings off. Passengers don't leap up to grab bags as usual. They wait, eyes shifting toward the front. The curtain opens. A duty supervisor boards with a clipboard, followed by 2 operations staff. Tara briefs them quietly, her tone steady. Fiona and Trent are asked to step aside. They do, postures stiff, try to maintain dignity that has already slipped away. They're escorted down the aisle, faces caught by every watching eye. Some passengers turn phones discreetly toward them, not for spectacle, but for documentation, ensuring nothing disappears into silence again. Avery remains seated, still as ever, until Tara approaches. "Mr. Cole," she says, voice calm, but with respect woven through it now. "You'll be contacted by Horizon Management. In the meantime, you're cleared to disembark at your convenience." He nods once. No flourish, no speech. He gathers a small bag, stands, and steps into the aisle. As he does, people shift, not away from him, but in small gestures of acknowledgement. Jasmine and Oliver meet his gaze, offering quiet nods. The teenager in row 6 murmurs, "Good for him," not loudly, but enough to be heard. He makes his way toward the exit. His pace is unhurried, his posture straight. The cabin that once pressed in on him now seems to part around him. Fiona and Trent are gone, the Whitakers silent shadows in their seats. And Avery, calm as ever, walks out with the weight of the storm behind him, leaving only the echo of silence that speaks louder than words. The passengers will talk. They'll remember the rip of paper, the single word ownership, the thumb tapping on leather. They'll remember the feeling that truth, even when almost erased, can hold its ground if someone has the patience to let it rise. The story doesn't end at the gate. It follows each person who witnessed it, tucked into their memory like a folded scrap of paper. Proof that respect isn't granted by uniforms or titles, but owed to every human who boards a plane. Avery doesn't look back. He doesn't need to. The arc has already shifted, and the rest of the flight, the rest of the story will only carry it further. The jet bridge is a tunnel of hush carpet muffling footsteps, glass catching the last light from the tarmac. People file past each other without the usual jostle, moving around Avery with small nods that are neither pity nor praise, just recognition. Tara steps up beside him at the doorway and asks, not commanding now, "Mr. Cole, would you have a moment?" He nods and follows her toward a side corridor where the airport hum thins to a low, even breath. A conference room sits with its lights already on. Inside, a duty supervisor waits with a leather folder closed at his fingertips, not eager, not anxious ready. He introduces himself as Daniel O'Keefe from Operations, with compliance joining by speakerphone and crew resources on standby. There's a tempered calm to the room that wasn't in the cabin. Chairs scrape softly. A pitcher of water and 2 tumblers give the table an ordinary dignity. Tara remains standing at the end, her notebook open, her stance tidy. The door clicks once more. Lena slips in, small and rigid, as if crossing a threshold into weather she can't predict. She keeps to the side of the wall, eyes lifted just enough to show up, not enough to pretend comfort. O'Keefe begins with the unvarnished part. "We need clarity. We'll take concise statements in turn. We have the audit and the audio. We'll focus on sequence. He nods to Tara, and her voice lays out the timeline with the plainness of a ledger. Boarding, seizure of document, destruction, manifest suppression, audit confirmation, instruction to relieve crew at gate. No adjectives. The structure alone carries the weight. Compliance on the speaker acknowledges each point, asking for timestamps. Tara provides them without reaching. She has carried worse nights than this in other rooms. It shows in the steadiness of her tone. O'Keefe turns to Lena. Ms. Ortiz, you recorded? She swallows, and her answer is careful. Audio only, sir. I pressed record when the document was taken. I stopped when Sergeant Nguyen asked me to send the file. O'Keefe asks her to describe where she stood, who was within earshot, what she observed of the passenger's behavior. She answers in small, exact sentences, hands still at her sides. When she is done, she adds the part that trembles but does not break. He never raised his voice. None of what they said was necessary. Compliance asked to confirm that she was not instructed to record. She was not. The word voluntariness is used, and it hangs in the air like a small shield she's earned. Avery's statement is next. He is brief. He describes setting his hand on the armrest of 2A, the refusal, the unilateral seizure of his pass, the rip, the second rip, the instruction to remove him, the enforcement posture that followed. He does not narrate his restraint as virtue. He states it as fact. I did not resist. I did not escalate. I asked that they check with ownership. O'Keefe nods, eyes on the folder, but listening in a way that says he'll remember the timbre, not just the words. And your identification? Shown to Sergeant Nguyen. Avery answers. Executive Director, Horizon Group. Compliance asks for the credential number. Avery provides it without looking down. The door opens again. Jasmine and Oliver step in at Tara's request. They provide their brief, corroborating the seizure and the language no flourish, no editorial. Jasmine mentions her angled photo and offers to send it. She does not dramatize the moment. She does not shrink from it either. What she saw matters here precisely because she refused to make herself the center of it. When O'Keefe thanks them, she glances at Lena and gives the smallest nod, the kind given between strangers who did something difficult at the same time. Outside the glass, the aircraft they just left is being connected to power, ground staff moving with that capable choreography that always looks like a quiet oath to duty. Inside, O'Keefe opens the leather folder at last. The top page is a printed system log with highlighted lines, device ID, timestamps, user authentication, suppression override. We'll hold the full discussion for the formal investigation, he says, voice even. But based on audit and testimony, immediate administrative steps are warranted. The speakerphone crackles. Compliance states the procedural language. The purser, Mr. Wallace, and the lead flight attendant, Ms. Blake, are placed on paid administrative leave pending investigation. Their access to passenger systems is suspended. Their union representatives will be notified. They will report to a scheduled review with HR and training. Captain Hargreaves will be assigned to administrative flight duties pending command judgment review by Fleet Ops. There is no gavel, just steps. The right kind. O'Keefe shifts his attention and adds what is not scripted. Ms. Ortiz, he says, you will be afforded protection from retaliation. Your cooperation is noted as exemplary. If you wish, you may request a mentor assignment. If you prefer to transfer off this base, we can prioritize that without penalty. Lena's mouth opens and then closes, as if the relief is too large to sit neatly in one expression. She only nods twice, eyes hot but dry. Avery watches her study the floor for a breath before lifting her chin. He recognizes in that movement the before and after a person won't fully grasp until years from now. He addresses compliance without shifting his tone. I have requests, he says, not for favor, for repair. He outlines them as if laying a straight edge on a table. 1. Confiscated documents shall be sealed and retained under chain of custody. Destruction of any passenger document is prohibited except by law enforcement or security with documentation. 2. Crew tablets shall log view angles and edit attempts on manifest records associated with disputes. and those logs shall be included in incident files. 3. A de-escalation protocol shall precede any physical contact with a seated passenger unless safety is at issue. 4. Bias-aware service training not as a seminar, but as recurrent instruction, assessed and tied to advancement. 5. A confidential escalation channel available to passengers and crew that routes to compliance independent of cabin hierarchy. 6. An audit of compensation policy to ensure passengers present during humiliation are made whole without haggling. He stops there. The room holds still around the shape of something practical. Compliance speaks after a considered pause. Noted the voice says, "Several align with initiatives in draft. We will attach your requests to the incident file as recommendations from executive leadership." O'Keefe adds quietly, and to the next manager's call. Tara watches the small redistribution of power with something like gratitude in her stance, as if a weight she's carried in other rooms of other nights has been named aloud. The door opens again. Preston and Sloan hover in the threshold, unsure whether they were summoned. Tara steps toward them, not hard, not soft. "We'll take a brief statement from both of you," she says. Preston tries for a smooth neutrality that frays at the edge. "We didn't do anything." Sloan murmurs, "We just thought he didn't belong." The sentence lands like an object that breaks even when you set it down gently. Tara's pen moves. O'Keefe looks at them the way one looks at turbulence measured, realistic. "You are not under review," he says. "But your remarks are part of what happened in that space. Please keep them concise." The statements take less than 5 minutes. When they leave, no one meets their eyes, not out of cruelty. The room is busy with the careful work of putting names in the right lines so that the next person won't have to live this same scene. O'Keefe turns back to Avery. "There's also passenger care," he says, returning to the part of his job that never should have left the center. "If you authorize, we'll extend goodwill credits to the front cabin and any economy passengers who were within the first 6 rows. It won't rewrite the experience. It will say we remembered." Avery nods. "Authorize," he says, and adds, "Note that I didn't need a title to earn a seat. Right in the file. Titles don't enter cabins. People do." O'Keefe's mouth shifts by a millimeter, the smallest admission that a line has landed where it needed to. The formalities resolve. Faxes turn into emails. Signatures become acknowledgments. The speakerphone goes quiet. Tara gives her report number to each person who will need it later. The room empties until it is only Avery and Lena left in a quiet that feels different than the earlier ones. It feels chosen, not imposed. She approaches, stopping a respectful distance away. "Sir," she says, "I was afraid, but I didn't know how not to press record." He sees how much of her is still braced for the cost. "Courage doesn't always arrive with a speech," he answers. "Sometimes it's the thumb that taps a button and doesn't lift off." She lets out something that isn't quite a laugh and isn't a sob. "I thought I might lose my job." "You might have," he says, and doesn't sweeten it. "You did the right thing anyway." She nods. "I'm glad it mattered." "It mattered," he says, "and it will matter again when you teach someone newer than you what to do when the room goes wrong." They leave the room together. At the corridor, they part their exits simple, as if dignity were something you can fold into a coat pocket and carry out into the ordinary lights of a terminal. Avery moves toward the lounge because that is where you go when the night has taken more of you than you plan to spend, and you need hot tea to give some of it back. The lounge attendant checks his boarding pass reissued at the gate, printed cleanly, the ink unbroken, and welcomes him with a tone that carries no theater, only respect practiced until it is muscle memory. He sits by a window where the field spreads out under high lamps like a lit map. A tug nudges a baggage cart. A marshaller's ones draw clean geometry in the air. He wraps his hands around the cup and watches the choreography, not thinking of victory, thinking of work. He drafts a note on his phone, not to scorch earth, but to seed it. To the board, incident summary, immediate actions, policy changes requested, training cadence, metrics for complaint routing, language for a memo to all crew that speaks to dignity without euphemism. He writes a short line for the front-of-house teams, too, the ones who will carry this to strangers at every gate in every city. If you're choosing between being right and being kind, begin with kind. It often turns out to be right once the facts catch up. When the note is done, he saves it. Not sent yet, tomorrow's work should not be done in tonight's heat. He finishes the tea, stands, and makes his way back to the concourse. Near the moving walkway, he sees Jasmine and Oliver again. They have not approached him before now, not wanting to make themselves part of a story that wasn't theirs. But here in the wide space where everyone returns to being just people, they stop. Jasmine says, "We didn't do much." "You did enough," he answers. "That's what much is on nights like this." Oliver adds, "I'm sorry for what you went through." Avery's face softens, not with forgiveness. He didn't need to forgive them, but with the ease of speaking in a space where nobody is performing. "I went through a version of it before," he says, and the sentence carries a weight that ends in a period, not a cliff. This time it ended differently. That matters. They part with a nod. He steps onto the walkway. The terminal moves past at a steady human speed, advertisements and gate numbers and families, and the particular sound of suitcase wheels on tile. He thinks of his father, who once pressed a ticket into a coat pocket and said, at a much smaller airport, "Try to make the person on the other side of the counter's evening a little easier than it was before you arrived." The coat was too big, the airport small, the advice permanent. He reaches the escalator and descends. Outside, the air is cool enough to set the lungs right. A shuttle idles. He gets in and sits by the window. The driver glances in a mirror once and catches Avery's eye. There's a flicker of recognition there, not who, but how. The driver tips 2 fingers from a wheel in a gesture that carries more gravity than a salute. Avery tips 2 back. Tomorrow there will be calls and meetings and language to strike from manuals and language to add. Tomorrow there will be leaders who don't yet know they will have to learn how to say, "I was wrong," and mean it. There will be Lena's name on a list with a mentor assigned, and Tara's report in a training deck, and O'Keefe's folder slid across a table at a manager's call where someone will suggest watering down a line, and someone else will say, "Leave it. It's the point." Tonight, there is a road sliding past under sodium lamps. Tonight, there is the steady, patient tap of a thumb against a memory that won't be sanded down to something easier than it was. He does not rehearse speeches. He doesn't script revenge. He closes his eyes for 4 clean breaths and opens them again to the sight of a runway light pulsing in the distance like a heartbeat. He thinks of the cabin, the quiet that came when process finally caught up with truth, and of the look on a trainee's face when she found out courage sometimes gets paperwork to stand behind it. He thinks of a simple sentence said in a room full of uniforms and titles. Respect shouldn't depend on a badge. The shuttle turns under a sign that points to arrivals and to departures, arrows going in opposite directions for people who are often headed to the same place. He smiles once, small and private, and the night lets him keep it. If this story made you stop and think about how people are judged before they're even known, then don't let it end here. Hit like to show respect matters more than appearances. Share this so others hear the message, and subscribe because every day I bring you stories that remind us why truth and dignity can't be torn apart. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated or judged by how you looked, only to surprise everyone with the truth? Your story might be the one that inspires someone else tonight.